hundreds of business executives are highly relevant. And, you know, I'm frankly amazed that since you grew up 5 blocks from there, you would think that what goes on in that state is irrelevant. I think it's been pretty impressive.
It's not
and the people who have jobs, the people who have jobs and educations and opportunities that didn't have them 10 years ago don't think it's irrelevant at all. They think it's highly relevant, and they wish the rest of the country
I don't have
had
a dog in this fight, but I'd like to get in on
you think
this.
it's relevant?
Governor Clinton has to operate under a balanced budget amendment. He has to do it. That is the law. I'd like to see a balanced budget amendment for America to protect the American taxpayers. And then that would discipline not only the executive branch, but the spending Congress. The Congress that's been in control of one party, his party, for 38 years. And we almost had it done. And that institution, the House of Representatives, everyone's yelling, clean house. One of the reasons is we almost had it done, and the Speaker, very able, decent fellow, I might add, but he twisted the arms of some of the sponsors of that legislation and had them change their vote. What's relevant here is that tool, that discipline, that he has to live by in Arkansas, and I'd like it for the American people. I want the line-item veto. I want to check off. So if the Congress can't do it, let people check off their income tax, 10% of it, to compel the government to cut spending. And if they can't do it, if the Congress can't do it, let them then have to do it across the board, what we call a sequester. That's the discipline we need, and I'm working for that, to protect the American taxpayer against the big spenders.
Mr. President, let's move to some of the leadership concerns that have been voiced about you. And they relate to something you said in your closing statement in Richmond the other night about the president being the manager of crises. And that relates to an earlier criticism that you began to focus on the economy, on health care, on racial divisions in this country only after they became crises. Is that a fair criticism?
Jim, I don't think that's a fair shot. I hear it echoed by political opponents, but I don't think it's fair. I think we've been fighting for day one to do something about the inner cities. I'm for enterprise zones. I have had it in every single proposal I've sent to the Congress. And now we hear a lot of talk, oh, well, we all want enterprise zones. And yet the House and the Senate can't send it down without loading it up with a lot of, these Christmas tree ornaments they put on the legislation. I don't think in racial harmony that I'm a laggard on that. I've been speaking out since day one. We've gotten the Americans for Disabilities Act, which I think is one of the foremost pieces of civil rights legislation. And yes, it took me to veto 2 civil rights quota bills because I don't believe in quotas. And I don't think the American people believe in quotas. And I beat back the Congress on that. And then we passed a decent civil rights bill that offers guarantees against discrimination in employment. And that is good. I've spoken out over and over again against anti-Semitism and racism. And I think my record as a member of Congress speaks for itself on that. What was the other part of it?
Well, it's just that you've spoken to it. I mean, but the idea, not so much in specific, but that it has to be a crisis before it gets your attention.
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true, but let others fire away on it.
Do you think that's true, Mr. Perot?
I'd like to just talk about issues, and so...
you don't think this is an issue?
No, but the point is, that's a subjective thing.
Well,
the subjective thing is, when does President Bush react? And it would be very difficult for me to answer that in any short period of time.
Well, then I'll phrase it differently then. He said the other night in his closing words in Richmond that one of the key things that he believes the American people should decide among the 3 of you is who they want in charge if this country gets to a crisis. Now, that's what he said, and the rap on the president is that it's only crisis time that he focuses on some of these things. Yeah. So my question to you, we're going to talk about you in a minute.
No,
my question to you...
I thought you'd forgotten I was here.
No. But my question to you is, so if you don't have nothing to say about it, fine. I'll go to Governor Clinton. But
no, I will let the American people decide that. I would rather not critique the 2 candidates.
All right. Governor, what do you think?
The only thing I would say about that is, I think that on the economy, Mr. Bush said for a long time there was no recession. and then said it would be better to do nothing than to have a compromise effort with the Congress. He really didn't have a new economic program until over 1,300 days into his presidency, and not all of his health care initiative has been presented to the Congress even now. I think it's important to elect a president who is committed to getting this economy going again and who realizes we have to abandon trickle-down economics and put the American people first again, and who will send programs to the Congress in the first 100 days to deal with the critical issues that America is crying out for leadership on: jobs, incomes, the health care crisis, the need to control the economy. Those things deserve to be dealt with from day one. I will deal with them from day one. They will be my first priority, not my election year concern.
Mr. President?
Well, I think you're overlooking that we have had major accomplishments in the first term. But if you're talking about protecting the taxpayer against his friends in the United States Congress, go back to what it was like when you had a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress. You don't have to go back to Herbert Hoover. Go back to Jimmy Carter. And interest rates were 21%. Inflation was 15%. The misery index, unemployment and inflation added together, it was invented by the Democrats, went right through the roof. We've cut it in half. And all you hear about is how bad things are. You know, remember the question, are you better off? Well, is a home buyer better off who can refinance the home because interest rates are down? Is a senior citizen better off because inflation is not wiping out their family's savings? I think they are. Is the guy out of work better off? Of course he's not. But he's not going to be better off if we grow the government. If we invest, as Governor Clinton says, invest in more government. You got to free up the private sector. You got to let small business have more incentives. For 3 months, quarters, I've been fighting, 3 quarters, been fighting to get the Congress to pass some incentives for small business. Capital gains, investment tax allowance, credit for first-time home buyers. And it's blocked by the Congress, and then if a little of it comes my way, they load it up with Christmas trees and tax increases. And I have to stand up and favor the taxpayer.
I have to we have to talk about Ross Perot now, or he'll get me, I'm sure. Mr. Perot, on this issue that I have raised at the very beginning, we've been talking about, which is leadership as President of the United States, the concerns, my reading of at least, my concerns about you as expressed by folks in the polls and other places, it goes like this. You had a problem with General Motors. You took your $750 million and you left. You had a problem in the spring and summer about some personal hits that you took as a potential candidate for President of the United States, and you walked out. Does that say anything relevant to how you would function as President of the United States?
I think the General Motors thing is very relevant. I did everything I could to get General Motors to face its problems in the mid-'80s while it was still financially strong. They just wouldn't do it. And everybody now knows the terrible price they're paying by waiting until it's obvious to the brain dead that they had problems. Now, hundreds of thousands of good, decent people, whole cities up here in this state, are adversely impacted because they would not move in a timely way. Our government is at that point now. The thing that I am in this race for is to tap the American people on the shoulder and to say to every single one of you, fix it while we're still relatively strong. If you have a heart problem, you don't wait till a heart attack to address it. So the General Motors experience is relevant. And at the point when I could not get them now to address those problems, I had created so much stress in the board, who wanted to just keep the Lawrence Welk music going, that they asked to buy my remaining shares. I sold them my remaining shares. They went their way. I went my way, because it was obvious we had a complete disagreement about what should be done with the company. But let's take my life in perspective. Again and again on complex, difficult tasks, I have stayed the course. When I was asked by our government to do the POW project, within a year, the Vietnamese had sent people into Canada to make arrangements to have me and my family killed. And I had 5 small children, and my family and I decided we would stay the course, and we lived with that problem for 3 years. Then I got into the Texans' War on Drugs program, and the big-time drug dealers got all upset. Then when I had 2 people imprisoned in Iran, I could have left them there. I could have rationalized it. We went over, we got them out, we brought them back home. And since then, for years, I have lived with the burden of the Middle East, where it's eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth country, in terms of their unhappiness with the fact that I was successful in that effort. Again and again and again, in the middle of the night, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, my government has called me to take extraordinary steps for Americans in distress. And again and again and again, I have responded. And I didn't wilt and I didn't quit. Now, what happened in July? We've covered again and again and again. But I think in terms of the American people's concern about my commitment, I'm here tonight, folks. I never quit supporting you as you put me on the ballot in the other 26 states. And when you asked me to come back in, I came back in. And talk about not quitting. I'm spending my money on this campaign. The 2 parties are spending your money, taxpayer money. I put my wallet on the table for you and your children. Over $60 million at least will go into this campaign to leave the American dream to you and your children, to get this country straightened out, because if anybody owes it to you, I do. I've lived the American dream. I'd like for your children to be able to live it too.
Governor, do you have a response to the staying the course question about Mr. Perot?
I don't have any criticism of Mr. Perot. I think what I'd like to talk about a minute is, since you asked him the question, was the General Motors issue. I don't think there's any question that the automobile executives made some errors in the 1980s. But I also think we should look at how much productivity has increased lately, how much labor has done to increase productivity, and how much management has done. We're still losing a lot of auto jobs, in my judgment, because we don't have a national economic strategy that will build the industrial base of this country. Just today I met with the presidents and the vice presidents of the Willow Run Union here, near here. They both said they were Vietnam veterans supporting me because I had an economic program to put them back to work. We need an investment incentive to modernize plant and equipment. We've got to control the health care costs for those people, otherwise we can't keep the manufacturing jobs here. And we need a tough trade policy that is fair, that insists on open markets in return for open markets. We ought to have a strategy that will build the economic and industrial base. So I think Mr. Perot was right in questioning the management practices, but they didn't have much of a partner in government here as compared with the policies the Germans and the Japanese followed, and I believe we can do better. That's one of the things I want to change. I know that we can grow manufacturing jobs. We did it in my state, and we can do it nationally.
Mr. President, do you have a response
to this?
Yes.
Well, I wondered when Governor Clinton was talking to the auto workers whether he talked about his and Senator Gore's favoring CAFE standards, as a fuel efficiency standards of 40 miles per gallon. That would break the auto industry and throw a lot of people out of work. As regarding Mr. Perot, I take back something I said about him. I once said in a frivolous moment when he got out of the race, if he can't stand the heat, buy an air conditioning company. And I take it back because I think he said he made a mistake. And the thing I find is if I make a mistake, I admit it. I've never heard Governor Clinton make a mistake. But one mistake he's made is fuel efficiency standards at 40 to 45 miles per gallon will throw many auto workers out of work, and you can't have it both ways. There's a pattern here of appealing to the auto workers and then trying to appeal to the spotted owl crowd or the extremes in the environmental movement. You can't do it as president. You can't have a pattern of one side of the issue one day and another the next. So my argument is not with Ross Perot. It is more with Governor Clinton.
Governor, what about that charge?
Well,
you want it both ways on this issue.
Let's just talk about the CAFE standards.
All right.
That's the fuel efficiency standards. They're now 27.5 miles per gallon per automobile fleet. I never said, and I defy you to find where I said, I gave an extensive environmental speech in April, and I said that we ought to have a goal of raising the fuel efficiency standards to 40 miles a gallon. I think that should be a goal. I've never said we should write it into law if there is evidence that that goal cannot be achieved. The National Science Foundation did a study which said it would be difficult for us to reach fuel efficiency standards in excess of 37 miles per gallon by the year 2000. I think we should try to raise the fuel efficiency. And let me say this. I think we ought to have incentives to do it. I think we ought to push to do it. That doesn't mean we have to write it into the law. Look, I am a job creator, not a job destroyer. It is the Bush administration